Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a very grounded, objective look at a fascinating concept, the architecture of emotional scarcity. We're going to explore how some people manage to literally live rent-free in a partner's head, while others are just politely forgotten. To do this, we'll be focusing closely on the source's pretty gritty, real-world narrative, going word by word to break down a playbook that really challenges conventional dating advice.
Now, right out of the gate, the source gives us a pretty serious warning. The author argues that to even make this playbook work, you have to completely kill your ego. You have to stop all the loud, flashy performances. It's all about embracing what they call quiet power. It's calm, it's highly intentional, and according to the author, quiet power is the exact thing that breaks down resistance.
And that brings us to the core rule that this entire philosophy rests on. You must become emotionally expensive. The foundational idea here is that your attention, your validation, and even just your physical presence need to feel incredibly rare and costly. And why does this work? Well, it's basic human psychology. The mind automatically assigns massive value to things that are scarce and hard to get. The author really stresses that this isn't just about playing silly games, it's fundamental psychology in action.
But listen, to actually become expensive, you first have to stop giving yourself away for free. The source identifies a few incredibly common behaviors that actively lower your value. We're talking about things like replying to messages instantly, or laughing at absolutely every joke, even if it's not actually funny. It's also giving constant unwarranted reassurance, or just handing out your complete focus for absolutely nothing. Stopping these specific behaviors is step one, because every single time you do them, you instantly lower your price in their mind.
So if you stop doing all of those common things, it brings up a pretty vital question, right? How exactly does the chase flip? How do you transition from being the one doing all the pursuing to the one actually being pursued? To prove this point, the author shares a very compelling real-world story, and we're going to look at it word for word to see exactly how this tension is built.
Let's look at the author's story, literally word by word. He writes, "Years ago, I was seeing this girl who was used to guys orbiting her 24/7. She would text me at 2 a.m. expecting long conversations. One night, she sent a wall of text. I read it, smiled, and replied with exactly 4 words. That's a dangerous thought. And then, complete and absolute silence for 14 hours. He continues, "The next morning she called me. Not texted, called. Voice note after voice note. Why are you like this?" she asked, half laughing, half annoyed. That was the exact moment the chase flipped. I didn't chase her, I became expensive.
And here is the absolute crux of the whole concept. You do not become unforgettable by doing more. You become unforgettable by doing less, but making every single drop of your attention feel incredibly valuable. Because his attention suddenly felt like a strictly limited resource, her brain immediately started working overtime to try and earn him back. She wasn't obsessed with someone who was just always there. She became obsessed with someone whose attention she actually had to earn.
Okay, so how do you actually implement this in real life? The author outlines what he calls the playbook. It's made up of 3 specific layers of scarcity that systematically builds this high level of obsession. Let's break down each of these 3 layers right now.
Layer 1 is what the source calls the selective mirror. Think about it. Most people act like cheap mirrors. They predictably reflect a partner's energy immediately. If she texts, "Hey," at 11 p.m., the cheap mirror replies instantly with tons of enthusiasm. But the expensive approach? He reads it, waits, and replies at 1 p.m. the very next day with a simple, "Hey, survived?" It's brilliant because that tiny intentional delay forces the other person to invest more just to qualify themselves and earn back his normal energy.
Moving on to layer 2, we have a very clear formula: the emotional spike and withdraw. First, you create an intense moment of connection. That's the spike. Maybe she's laughing, the vibe is amazing, and you deliver one deep compliment or an intense look. You let that connection heat up until the tension peaks. And then, you break it and leave. You withdraw abruptly, physically or digitally, right when the vibe is absolutely electric.
Now you might be wondering, why on earth would you leave right at the peak? Well, the source explains that this withdrawal creates a psychological vacuum that you will instantly try to fill. Whether you stand up to leave a date early while you're both having a great time, or you just go completely dark for a day after a highly flirty text, this intentional vacuum is the exact space where craving grows. Her brain is basically forced to replay that spike on a continuous loop.
And that brings us to the final layer, the private world. The strategy outlined here is to give just a tiny taste of your rich, hidden universe. It makes the other person dangerously addicted to unlocking the rest of the mystery. You tell vivid, interesting stories, but you deliberately omit the best part to create a cliffhanger. You maintain completely separate interests and friends. You answer questions with just enough flavor to cause hunger, and occasionally, you just smile and say, "You know what? That story stays with me for now."
Yeah, what's really interesting is how incredibly practical this gets. The author introduces a matrix called the calibration strategy, showing you exactly how to adjust these withdrawals based on specific behavioral patterns. If she's anxious, you shorten the withdrawals so she doesn't completely panic, but you absolutely keep them present. If she's used to getting everything easily in life, you stretch those gaps out and make her earn every single reply. And if she starts chasing hard, you reward her briefly and then immediately raise your price again.
But listen, the author issues a really strict warning here. Once she is hooked, you can never let the price become cheap again. The source emphasizes that the absolute second she feels like she has all of you, the mystery dies and the craving dies right along with it. The man she cannot fully figure out is literally the exact man she cannot stop thinking about.
Let's step back for a second and look at the actual behavioral science validating this greedy playbook. It all comes down to information gap theory. This is a psychological principle which states that the human brain absolutely hates uncertainty about something it wants. Whenever there is missing information, it creates a gap. And every single time she thinks about you and doesn't have the full answer, her brain desperately tries to close that gap, which triggers a powerful dopamine loop.
So, by playing on this information gap, the author points out that you aren't just ignoring someone, you are systematically delivering little dopamine hits every single time she tries to figure you out. You are literally rewiring her brain for obsession. You stop explaining yourself, you stop chasing validation, and you simply allow yourself to become her favorite unsolved mystery.
I'm going to leave you to reflect on the immense power of absence with this final, really striking quote from the author. Breathe, stay expansive, let the silence do the screaming. According to the source, you can watch just how fast the gaps get filled when you simply stop performing. But it does leave us with a pretty fascinating psychological question. When we engineer scarcity to create obsession, are we building a genuine connection, or are we simply hacking the brain's dopamine loop? Something to think about.